Hey everybody, this is Carl back again for another spoiler review. Continuing on with the spooky season, I just covered the Netflix Castlevania series, the first 4 seasons, uh, chronicling chronicling the Trevor Belmont saga. Since it's 4 seasons, I didn't want to do four separate videos, so I just did it in one go, which is like a 2-hour long discussion about all that. But now I want to cover Nocturne that just came out a few days ago, but just getting around to watching it. And honestly, man, they really stepped it up, because the first 2 seasons of Castlevania for the Trevor Belmont story was only 4 episodes each, while this, since they got the budget and the goodwill behind it, the first season of Nocturne is 10 episodes. No, it's 8 episodes. I'm sorry. And this covers it's like 300 years later since the events of Trevor Belmont's adventure. And after Trevor and Sypha, got together, they had 3 or 4 children. And while that will cover Symphony of the Night, Curse of Darkness, and Dracula's Darkness games, this Nocturne series covers the Castlevania game Rondo of Blood, which is a sequel to Symphony of the Night. And in this time period is set around the French Revolution era, 1789. And I did learn about the French Revolution in social studies in middle school, but escapes me. But let's see, we can just briefly cover it so you can get a general understanding of what was going on. The underlying causes of the French Revolution were the Ancien regime's inability to manage rising social and economic inequality. Population growth and interest payments on government debt led to economic depression, unemployment, and high food prices. Man, it's like more things change, more stay the same, doesn't it? Combined with regressive tax system and resistance to reform by the ruling elite, the result was a crisis. Louis the I'm pretty sure this should be like 16, proved unable to resolve. Between 1700 and 1789, the French population grew from an estimated 21 to 28 million, while Paris alone had over 600,000 inhabitants, of whom roughly 1/3 had no regular work. Food production failed to keep up with these numbers, and whilst wages increased by 22% between 1770 and 1790, prices rose by 65% in the same period, which many blamed on government inaction. Combined with a series of poor harvests, by 1789, the result was a rural peasantry with nothing to sell and an urban proletariat whose purchasing power had collapsed. High levels of state debt, and which acted as a drag on the wider economy, are often attributed to the 1778 to 1783 Anglo-French War. However, one economic historian argues neither its level in 1788 or previous history can be considered an explanation for the outbreak of revolution in 1789. In 1788, the ratio of debt to gross national income in France was 55.6% compared to 181.8% in Britain. And although French borrowing costs were higher, the percentage of revenue devoted to interest payments was roughly the same in both countries. So basically, yes, the overall debt or what have you. So we're in that kind of time period. We're covering in this time period what was critical was the slave trade as well, where one of the characters were involved with our main character, Richter Belmont, the descendant of uh, uh, Trevor and Cypher. Annette, who is a former slave, who is a practitioner of magic herself. And I kind of like the turn, the change made in the series, because in the game she's a white woman, but they didn't touch on that kind of the French Revolution or the slave trade in game in 1993. But yeah, Annette, young sorceress and an ex-slave from the Caribbean. We got Maria Renard, a young revolutionary during the French Revolution. Tara Renard, the mother of Maria, and later vampire servant, servant. We got Woodward, an opera singer and Annette's partner in monster hunting. Abbot Emmanuel, a forge master and Maria's father, also priest. Ms. Zark, a knight serving under the abbot. One of the main antagonists, Olrox, an Aztec vampire who killed Richter's mother. I like the design of this guy. Then we got the main villain, Shikmat, or Elizabeth Bathory. Yeah, because her and this other woman, Doltra, who isn't from the actual game but made for this show, hail from ancient Egypt and took on the whole name warrior who took on the she just took on the whole vampire messiah thing and took on the name of this ancient warrior Egyptian goddess, and she was part responsible of turning Drolta into a vampire, because she made a note that she came from ancient Egypt, and that's when she was turned. So we basically got our main players. So we meet young Richter as his mom was killed by the Aztec vampire Olrox. But you leave him alive, given the fact that, he's a kid, I'll wait till you get older, we'll hash out, then. So this leaves Richter with, obviously traumatized. He witnesses his mother die at the hands of this vampire. And this leaves him with as essentially nightmares. And obviously a severe anxiety, and it's like a state of fear. It's essentially Olrox's Richter's Joe Chill. And his and when he shows back up later in his life, he the fear overwhelms him and obviously runs away in the middle of a fight, which most of them understanding except Annette, which Annette later understands, but in the thick of it, she was like, you know, kind of PO'd about it. But getting the fact that her roots, you know, coming from like, you know, born into slavery, and her mother and, you know, father was, you know, brought from Africa to the slave trade. It was like, it was, obviously she, you know, it took her a minute to understand Richter's thing, because like she like I got nightmares too. We all got nightmares, but I, you know, went through real trauma, and it's like it's hard to like not. You can't really. No one wants to play, you know, who had the worst, trauma kind of situation, because it's different degrees, but they all are valid. It's like trying to play who had it worse, slavery or the Holocaust. Who had it worse? No one wants to play that game. It's a pointless discussion. So, and Richter also has some kind of mental block, given the fact that he is a Belmont who comes from a line of not only hunters, but his ancestor was a magician. He's Belmont. It also is a practitioner of magic. But Richter, for a while, could not unlock that. I guess he has a mental block given the trauma he experienced. But he still utilized the iconic, vampire killer whip. So they meet up with Annette and her friend Udard. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that freaking name properly. I know I'm butchering it. Udward. And she met Udward when she was escaping, and he was an opera singer, because he's one of those like few Africans who found their way into avoiding, because now that they probably haven't still been judged by the color of their skin, but to a lesser degree, given the fact that he put in a position where it's a little bit slightly more privileged than most people of the slave trade. But he also was part of helping former slaves escape their masters. So that's why they formed this kind of bond. And they, since then, because she discovered, because her particular slave master was also a vampire. And so she soon discovered her powers, her magic powers, where it seems like she turned, I guess, inanimate objects, or just, because at first I think it was glass or metal, but it's just inanimate objects, I guess, into particular weapons. But upon trying to, Richter, Maria, Lord, Annette, they all tried to spawn this aristocratic vampire shindig, trying to, nix their operations. They end up getting discovered, and Udward got killed in the process. But then turns out that the priest, the abbot, unlike Hector and Isaac, they utilize, I guess technically he would be a forge master, but he didn't do it the archaic way as Isaac and Hector would have done it. He actually has like, mechanisms, in order to, kind of like a machine assembly line kind of situation. Not necessarily like an assembly line per se, like they got multiple machines. It's one machine that was made in hell, brought onto Earth, and it takes bodies and more efficiently makes night creatures. And one of the bodies was Udward. And something about Udward's soul let him still retain a bit of his consciousness. And you see that come full swing when Annette, Richter, and Maria was getting attacked by other night creatures. And before Annette would have gotten killed, he jumped in and attacked one of the other night creatures. And then the whole fight just ceased, and the night creatures took Udward, put him in a cell. And I gotta say, the voice actor for Udward obviously is an accomplished, had to be an accomplished singer, because he's an opera singer. And I'm not an opera guy, but man, the way he bellows in his singing is just like, who's the guy's name? Sidney James Harcourt. And I like to believe that was him actually doing the operatic singing, because it was magnificent. I mean, it's like you can hear it, like, like the music soothes the savage beast kind of situation. A lot of the night creatures who are standing guard are just like encapsulated by the music, and it just solely enthralled. And this is the first time where you actually have at least a few rare occasions where night creatures actually speak and retain some bit of consciousness. And you see, Udward utilize that to his advantage. But in the attempt trying to bust him out, because she feels like she owes it to him to not let him rot that way, or at the very least end his suffering, but realizing that he's still in there. But then what's her name, Drolta, you see like Aurochs, then like the priest and his knight, like all these guys are just like showing up, and they just looking at each other like, what the hell, because they managed to sneak in through like a tunnel system. And I want to take a moment right here to mention, like, there is an Assassin's Creed game based, I think, Assassin's Creed Rogue, I think it was called. I'm not a huge Assassin's Creed player, but there was one set in the French Revolution, and I gotta say, if you ever watched Death Battle, I wanted to see, like, any one of these Belmont men or people to fight one of these ancestors of Ezio, because most of them share the same time periods. It'd be kind of fun, given the fact that their whole theme of fighting these particular enemies through these particular time periods is just so interesting. It's very fun. But they're taking all these night creatures and they're fighting off some of these vampires. But like I said, when Richter sees Aurochs first time in a long time, he just freaks and just runs. And he runs so far, he just just get the hell out of there and just ran off. And as the others making their escape too, they just realized, he just gone. And it's like, he didn't bother to stay and make sure we got out. So Annette mad, and she later is tracking Doltra and Aurochs as a discussion about the vampire messiah, and then she ends up bumping into her former slave master and utilizing the power to entrap him in these metal gates and she shaped them into crosses, so he can't make an escape like he did last time. And as the sun rises, she managed to get her revenge on this guy and have him burnt alive. Which is, as a black person, it's very satisfying just to watch a slave master just getting murdered. And it's like, I don't care. It's like, it's kind of like a Nazi. Do not feel any sympathy for them. We're not, shed a single tear. Because at that point, you're not a person no more. Hey, sorry, not sorry. What next? And Richter ends up bumping into, which I thought for a moment was Alucard, given the fact that he was very pale and had these yellow eyes, and like, his white hair. Well, I think Alucard is technically bleach blonde, but for a split second I thought it was just Alucard. I was like, is that Alucard? They should have done a little bit, slightly different with the art with this particular character, because they seemingly look like they purposely trying to make him look like Alucard to try to fool us, because it's very, very easily to mistake him for the other character. But it turns out that was his grandfather, who Richter was told was dead. But it turns out that he maintained like a particular distance from his grandchild. The grandfather's name is Jewel or Juste. Juste. And he kind of got, like, I keep using the word disillusion, but just, I guess, lost his drive for the job. Given the fact that, like Cypher, he enjoyed the heroic work and, taking down monsters, woo woo. But then one vampire managed to not only kill his wife, but his best friend. And he, at some point, stopped focusing on being a father. So the daughter, Richter's mom, it's like, didn't want anything to do with the father anymore. And he's trying to explain to Richter, like, sometimes the job, man, any one of these, because it's always going to be evil out there. There's always going to be some vampire adversary that's going to be worse than the last. There's always going to be a Dracula. There's always going to be a vampire queen. There's always going to be an Aurochs. And more often than not, they're always going to be worse than the last. And at some point along the line, they're going to take the ones you love. And that's the drawback of this job. And it's sad, but if you ever played any amount of the Castlevania games, that is like kind of tragedy in a lot of these Belmont families, that a lot of them end up losing loved ones and friends to the job, especially if any one of those monsters know about any particular close one you might have to use against you. It's kind of like any superhero story. So you see this vampire messiah for the first time, and as soon as you see her, I cannot help but think of Lady Demetress from Resident Evil 7. I'm like, man, this is pretty much Tall Lady all over again. And I cannot, I'm pretty sure at some point, I'm surprised it hasn't done it already, where as soon as Lady D first popped up in the first trailer of that game, there's a bunch of memes going around about, and already people are fetishizing this woman. So I'm shocked there wasn't an immediate fetishizing of the Vampire Messiah immediately. I'm shocked, because the internet is undefeated when it comes to perversion. But I was like, man, these two ladies ever fought, man, it's insane. But you know, this vampire messiah probably got a one up on Lady D, given the fact that she actually got magic powers in a way. And here's like a good, you know, twist. She and Dotra and a few of the vampire underlings are in cahoots with Albert because the whole, you know, situation with the French Revolution and like the whole upheaval. His point of view is like, I gotta protect, you know, because like there's tons of other priests that their churches burnt down. A lot of them got beheaded because during the French Revolution there was a lot of beheadings via guillotine. And it's like, I don't want that to happen. We got to maintain some level of order here. And they also like want a foothold because they have to work with a lot of these aristocrats in order to maintain a particular position of power, to avoid, you know, not only having to hide in the shadows all the time, or just because they have to, as long as they feed on like peasants, you know, they don't care, but just stay away from like the high society types. So it's just like an uneasy alliance, but obviously they have aspirations on, you know, getting over that, because they don't want to have to work with humans, period, because, you know, they view humans as livestock and they don't feel the need to work with them, but for the time being they have to do what they have to do. Then Olrox, surprisingly, has more layers to him beyond just another adversary for Richter to deal with. He doesn't want to see, because he has forced to bow to this woman. He doesn't see that he needs to, because he's an Aztec person, and the only reason he went after Richter's mom because she was responsible for killing his lover years ago. And ironically, the knight who's working alongside the priest, he and this vampire is having like are lovers. It's just like, so it's very Game of Thrones in a way. There's all these like political, I want to say it's not too much political intrigue, but the political intrigue is just in the form of the French Revolution. But that's, you know, kind of in the background. It only pops up in certain circumstances that kind of feed into the overall narrative. But I like this dialogue between the two of them, where Olrox is telling like, what's the knight's name, Mitzrak, that, you know, about his history, and he only loved one person in his life, and that was the man that Richter's mom killed. And he made like a point where it's like, you know, because he also had this whole notion of revolutionary, the whole theme of revolutionaries and rising up is prevalent so much throughout the season. And he nearly like bought it from his, you know, former boyfriend, but then, you know, lost that same faith that he had once he lost him. And Mitzrak made it like a point. I was like, oh, what, you only saying this because you love me? And like, you know, I was like, no. But it's funny how that kind of turned around when, after like Olrox realizing like the insane gravity of this vampire queen, he ends up stealing one of the books that explains how this whole creating these night creatures and this machine that comes from hell, and how to get rid of it. Once he gives it to Richter and the others, they finally go and try to take the fight to the vampire queen. And of course she has this is very anime as of course she has this, she and Dolce has these second forms they take, and they take the fight to them. And while Annette is trying to push, because Maria's mom's taking a book and using a spell to open up the doorway to hell, so Annette could push the machine through it, because they can't destroy it by conventional means. They just have to send it back to hell. But after the Dolce finds out that Abbott has a daughter, so they can use her against him in order to get a better control over him or get upper hand, he just like this dude's like went off the deep, like you seemingly like at first you feel for him because it's like, hey, like I'm a daughter, I'm doing everything trying to protect you, even if it means I have to like keep my distance from you. It's very like go hand in hand with Jute. I keep wanting to say Jules Juste, with trying to keep his distance from Richter. But unlike Juste, Abbott just like kind of hoping for, because he feels like he's doing this for God, just like that old priest who went crazy in season 1 of Castlevania in the Trevor Belmont saga. He's kind of hoping that God would intervene like he did for Abraham and Isaac. But the queen mentions like, I don't want to kill Maria, I want to turn her into a vampire. But the mom steps in and said like, no, turn me, because if he wants somebody that Abbott loves, he loves me still, so turn me and leave her alone. So they end up turning her, but Dolce went after the others after they realized the whole fight is lost at this point. And right as it seems like Richter is about to die, in comes Alucard, comes out of nowhere, kills Dolce, and the whole city that it was running from, that seems like to be filled with a lot of vampires. Now it's like, okay, I'm here, tell me what's going on. And like that's how the season ends. Hell of a cliffhanger. I was wondering when we're going to see Alucard, because he's like the Nick Fury since Trevor Belmont in these games, where he usually pop up here and there as like a wise mentor kind of figure who worked with Trevor so long, where he always mentors the next generation or pop up to help along the way on a particular generation. Not all the time, but enough where it's like, when things get rough, he just shows up, at some point. It's very fun. And I remember there's one particular game, I forget which one of the Castlevania games that it happens, but I know it's definitely after the whole Richter story, where one of the Belmonts dealing with maybe Dracula, but some adversary, and utilizing some kind of power that brings in like the spirits of the past Belmonts to help fight this foe. It was awesome. I forgot which one game, because I know there's not like a whole sleuth, but whole scores of Belmont past generations, but at least a good handful. And I forgot which game it was, but that always stuck out in my brain. And it's like, that would have been like a awesome moment in a series when it get to that point, if they get to that point, where you see like all these different Belmonts from the previous show just show up. Probably like a better thing, something that you wanted to see in Rise of Skywalker with Rey dealing with Palpatine, and seeing previous Jedi show up to lend their power to her instead of just doing it in the voice. That's what I want to see at some point. But yeah, so far that is Castlevania Nocturne. It's very good. The animation's phenomenal. The fight scenes is great. They always do like the best with the fight scenes. And when he unlocks, gets past his like mental block and finally gain access to his magic, when he's thinking about his friends and overcoming his fear, because you know he was afraid essentially, and that causes him to like kind of have like a mental block that prevented him to trust in himself and gain access to his magic abilities. But it's the doing what you need to do despite you being afraid is true acts of bravery. And that's what he realized when he's thinking about all his friends, that it's like I gotta do this and I can't be afraid, or at least like I can't let my fear dictate my actions. And I love the part when you have like almost a similar moment with Annette, where she's talking with her ancestors, and it's almost looked like in Wakanda, like the ancestral plane. It almost looked like that. You see all like like Annette speaking with her mentor through the actual plane, and seeing all these spirits of ancestors, and where she gets her power from like this African war god like Ogun. Which, by the way, I did like a discussion video a couple of years ago during Black History Month, where I discussed about all these movies about different Norse gods or Greek gods and etc. There's no movie where it's talking about the African pantheon. And it really need to make some, because Africa had a pantheon before the colonizers forced Christianity on us. And it's like, if I was director, I wanted to make it like a movie, doing something about the different African pantheons, because Annette is drawing the power from, I'm assuming it was her war god, and that's where she's driving her magic from. And also in the game, Annette ends up with Richter, so it's like because it'll be fun. Like, okay, at some point along the line, these Belmonts hook up with other people from obviously different races at some point along the line, and all that is kind of ends like a mixed bag of racial genetics. So I think the last Castlevania game was set in like 1999. That's the time period it was set in. I'm assuming it was 1999 or something like that. But they need to make another Castlevania game, I swear, man. And this time, carry on to sort of modern day. Doesn't have to be the same year, but at least in the general vicinity, to continue on with the bloodline. But that'll be fun, because I want to play like a Castlevania game set in modern time, and not no difficult ass side scroller. But anyway, that was pretty much Castlevania Nocturne. I think I said all I can think I need to say. Music is great, acting is great, the animation is phenomenal. Fight choreography is great. They put all the money in the budget, what they needed to, in the right places. And I think 10 episodes is long enough to tell like a decent amount of story, and it's easily bingeable. Oh, and of course I'll be going, the next movies for the Halloween month we'll be covering this week will be the 3 Blade movies. So look forward to that. I don't know if I think I technically have time to cover, because I cover like a Blade comic book. This is short, so I can cover that in like a good 30 minutes or less. So that'll be the next thing I'll do before I end the stream for tonight. But yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, Let me know what you think of Castlevania Nocturne. What the good, the bad stuff that you found through it. Like, share this with friends. If you watch this on Twitch live, please follow me there. Follow me on links in the description below. And I'll see you all soon. Take care.